Welcome back. We're discussing a recent arbitration decision from British Columbia. And joining me now is Suzanee Anton KC, who is the former Attorney General from British Columbia from 2013 to 2017. Thank you again, Ms. Anton, for joining me. We were sort of unpacking a little bit of the decision. We'll get to more of that in a moment. And kind of, it seems, again, so far away, but 2 years ago when all these mandates came in, I guess almost 3 years ago now, it seems like so long ago, but we forgot, and many of us forgot what happened a couple of years ago. So how did employers or vaccine mandates by employers impact Canadians? How many Canadians were actually impacted negatively?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but there were definitely a lot of employers. Now, individual private employers made their own individual decisions, but government itself, the federal government made mandate decisions, as you know. The Prime Minister said that if you haven't been vaccinated, you can't get on an airplane, which I just thought was extraordinarily outrageous and very highly political, not based, not founded on any public health reason. And then individual provinces had mandates. Interestingly, for the healthcare workers, which BC, as I mentioned, still does have those mandates, the problem is in a lot of this COVID response that people didn't stand up for themselves. And interestingly, and when they did stand up for themselves, there were too few of them. So, for example, the unvaccinated nurses, let me use them as an example, in British Columbia did stand up for themselves, but their union didn't back them and their colleagues didn't back them. The only place which was quite different was Quebec, where the healthcare workers said, no way are we going along with that. And you know what happened? Government backed down right away.
Yes, I remember
and
that.
Were there any different health outcomes in Quebec than in the rest of the country? I doubt it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the arbitrator in this case, there were two things that he did that were, to me, quite extraordinary. One was ordering the compensation, which, as a matter of fact, is still outstanding what that will be. And I imagine the union and the company are talking quite closely. But the second thing he did was find, and this is where I was quite interested in the case, he found that the advice of the British Columbia public health officer, provincial health officer rather, was wholly inconsistent with all the other advice that was available at that time. So he considered her advice in the spring of 2022. And that advice, by the way, her continues to today. Where
this is Bonnie Henry, the medical officer of health.
Dr. Bonnie Henry, yes. Supported by the minister. I always want to add that because it's not Dr. Henry acting alone. It's Dr. Henry and the ministry and the minister. She has found that a vaccinated person is less, or let me put it the other way around, that an unvaccinated person presents a greater risk than a vaccinated person. The difference in the case that this big pure later arbitration case is that the union called really good evidence. And the evidence, they called an immunologist, an expert, and they called the evidence of a lot of other public health authorities, not British Columbia, but a lot of others, all of whom said that by the spring of 2022, the initial 2-dose vaccine regime had kind of expired in terms of the infectiousness of people. So it didn't make much difference whether you were unvaccinated or vaccinated with that initial 2 doses. British Columbia is the only jurisdiction that I know of, and I don't know what about those Ontario health hospitals. I'm not so familiar with that one. But in British Columbia, that advice continues that an unvaccinated person is more high risk than a vaccinated person. And what the arbitrator said that conclusion of the British Columbia Public Health Authorities is wholly inconsistent with everywhere else, every other jurisdiction that they looked at. And that was quite remarkable.
Yeah, no, so reading that, it definitely is remarkable. And hearing you say it again, I mean, even if you look south of the border to Anthony Fauci, who was speaking on behalf of CDC, I mean, his views changed on this issue and are more in line with this arbiter. So it's interesting that BC was sort of on going rogue here or not pivoting in their advice.
So that's correct. And the public health order, which continues to this day, which is the reason our nurses and other public health lab workers are still fired. They are fired under the authority of this public health order. And my argument is that if the public health order, which is the only authority for a public health order is health, right? It's not anything else. It's not a political consideration. It's health. And if the health foundation for that order does not exist, then the order, to me, is flawed.
Right.
And that is the argument that I think we will start to see raised in other arbitrations and court cases here in British Columbia and perhaps in Ontario as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fascinating, and who knows where this will go. We're going to continue this discussion when we return from this commercial break. Please stick around.